Hi everyone. So in this video, we're going to practice how to make specific intervals. In the previous exercises, we worked on generic intervals, but for this week's lesson, we were talking about specific intervals, which take into consideration not only the generic interval, the distance on the staff as written on the staff, but also the number of half steps and accidentals. So we're going to practice that today. So we're gonna use interval construction today. We're gonna practice this slightly different than we did last week. So we're gonna use this exercise right here under staff construction, interval construction. And before we get going, I wanna try to change the settings to make sure that we get the exercise doing what we want. I'm gonna stick to treble clef, but you can change your clef if you want one that's you're more comfortable with. So it's up to you. Ultimately, the intervals work exactly the same no matter what clef you use. So yeah, feel free to change the clef if you want to use bass clef or alto clef or any other clef for that matter. You can even try it on the grand staff, which could be really interesting if you want to practice the relationship between the treble clef and the bass clef. All right, moving on, we're going to keep this range fairly wide with some ledger lines, but not too wide. We're gonna take a few key signatures since specific intervals are gonna take into consideration accidentals, and because of that, key signatures are gonna matter as well. Just to make things a little bit simpler, I am actually going to just do some key signatures. I'm not gonna do all of them. So let's just stick to 3 flats and 3 sharps for now, just to make it not too difficult. But just remember, as you get better at this, you can change all these settings and practice really difficult exercises. For the direction, I'm gonna keep ascending only, just because that was the way that the examples in the lesson did it. But as you practice more, you may want to try descending and both. Okay, so required quality, we're going to turn that on. This is the most important thing. So when we talk about interval quality, we're really talking about that idea of major, minor, perfect intervals, and then augmented and diminished. So this is what's taking us from the generic interval to the specific interval. So make sure that this is on. Otherwise, if you turn that off, you're just doing generic intervals again. Next step, we're gonna make sure that we select all the intervals. We studied all these in the lesson, so we wanna be able to practice all of them. Cool. And for the difficulty, let's start with something not too difficult. So let's start with level 2. I do want some accidental, so I'm not gonna pick level 1, but I wanna pick level 2. And as you get better at this, try the higher levels so that you can challenge yourself. All right, that should do it. That's all we're gonna do. Okay, so when we're building specific intervals, we're going to take a 3-step process. The first step is building the generic interval, and for the generic interval, we're just gonna count spaces and lines on the staff until we get the generic interval we need. Step 2 is gonna be figured out the number of half steps that we need to make the quality of the interval. And step 3 is we're gonna add accidentals if we need to change the note that we add to make the correct number of half steps or to make the correct quality of the interval. All right. So it's gonna be a 3-step process, and if we follow that process, we're gonna be able to make any specific interval we want. All right, let's get started. So we're being given an F on the staff. This is F sharp because we have F sharp in the key signature. So remember that unless there is an accidental next to the note, the key signature is gonna count for all of the notes on the staff. All right. So we're being given an F sharp, and we are asked to make a minor second. The number 2 is gonna be our generic interval, and the lowercase m is our quality, which is a minor interval, minor second. So let's start with step 1, which is to make the generic interval. Generic intervals are very easy. We're just gonna count space line, space line, space line on the way up only, since this exercise is being set to do ascending only. So we're never gonna have to really go down unless we make a mistake and we overshoot it. But for now, we're just gonna go up. So let's make a second, which is gonna be the next the next line after this space. So that's our second. Okay, so next step is to figure out the number of half steps. So a minor second is 1/2 step. A minor second is the same thing as a half step. So that's 1. And I'm actually going to pull up the pop-up keyboard so you guys can see this. So if we go from F sharp, which is here, this is F natural, we go up a half step, we get F sharp. And we go 1/2 step up. That's going to be our minor second. So now we already have G on the staff, and there is no G sharp on the key signature. We just have F sharp and C sharp. That means this G is natural. So from F sharp to G natural, this is already G natural on the keyboard. So we don't actually need to do anything to this G to make a minor second. We already have what we need. We don't need to make it natural because it's already natural by default. We don't need to make it flat or sharp. So let's just submit that. That should be the correct answer. All right, cool. So let's take a look. We are starting with E, and this is E flat because we have E flat on the staff. I mean on the key signature. So this is our E flat. That means this is E flat. There is no accidental next to it. We're being asked to make a major second. So let's start with step number 1, which is to make the generic interval. Let's go up. We're starting from a line, so the next space up is going to be our second. All right, so that's all we need to make the generic second. And now the quality is an uppercase M is a major interval, a major second. So a major second, if you remember from the previous example, a minor second was 1/2 step. So a major second is going to be 1/2 step more. So that's good. We're gonna need 2/2 steps in this particular example. So let's take a look at the keyboard. If we start with E flat, this is E natural. E flat is here, and then we need 2/2 steps. All right. So that's our major second. All right. And this key right here is F natural. We also have F written on the staff, and because there is no F flat on the key signature, that F is going to be natural by default. So we do not need to change this note at all. That is going to be F natural, so it's exactly what we need. We don't need to make it natural because it's not flat on the key signature, and we don't need to make flat or sharp because then otherwise we would end up with a different interval. So this is all we need here. Let's submit. Okay, very cool. All right, so we have a bigger interval now. We have a 6th generic, and then we have a minor, lowercase m, minor 6th. We're starting from C, and let's first make the generic interval. And we're just gonna count. We're starting from the first ledger line at the bottom of the staff. So next space is a second. Next line is third, next space is fourth, next line is fifth, and the next space is sixth. That's our generic interval. So, but now let's take a look at this. So the first note was C, but it's not just C. It's C sharp because our key signature has a C sharp on it. We have F sharp and C sharp. So this is going to be a C sharp. And this A is by default A natural because there is no A sharp on the staff, on the key signature. So let's figure it out. So a minor 6th is gonna need, if you remember, I like to sometimes keep a reference of like certain intervals that I know how many half steps there are. Like for example, a perfect 5th, I know is 7 half steps. And the minor 6th is the next interval after that. So if we started from C sharp, that would be our perfect 5th. G sharp, that would be 7 half steps, and a minor 6th is going to be 1 more half step. So that's going to be 8 half steps. And if you want to count it out, you can. So C sharp, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8. 8 half steps. That's our minor sixth. So we now have a minor sixth, and let's figure out if we need to add an accidental to make this work. So this key right here is already A natural, and that's what we have on the staff. So we don't need to add an accidental to it because that note as written is already A natural. So this C sharp A natural is already a minor sixth. All right, so let's go ahead and submit. Cool. All right, minor third. So we have F on the staff. Before we worry about the key signature, let's just make a generic third. So we're starting from this space, the F natural space. So we're gonna go second next line and third next space. So that's a generic third. The minor third is going to be, let's see, let's just see just with C natural, and then we'll do it with the actual pitches. So C1, that's a minor second, major second, minor third, so that's 1, 2, 3. 3 half steps makes a minor third. Now let's do it with the notes that we actually have on the staff now. So we're starting with F, but not just F natural, F sharp, because it's in our key signature. So F sharp, it's gonna be, that's F natural, F sharp is right here. So let's count 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. So that's our minor third. And this key is A natural. We also have A written on the staff, and there is no A sharp on the key signature. That means that this is A natural by default. So that minor third is going to we're not going to need to change put any accidentals on this note to make it work. Okay, cool. So we have a slightly harder example now. We have generic seventh, and the lowercase d is diminished. So remember that seventh can either be major, minor, and if we lower that by a half step, if we lower the minor interval by a half step, we end up with diminished. So a diminished seventh is going to be 1 half step less than the minor seventh. We don't have any key signature, so we don't have to worry about taking into consideration key signature. We're just going to have to deal with accidentals if we need them. All right, so step number 1, let's make a generic seventh. So this is straightforward. We're going to go, next line is second, space is third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. All right, so this is a generic seventh. But let's figure out what we need to make this. So let's first take a look at what this is. So this is B natural and A natural. If we count B natural to A natural, let's see how many half steps that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 half steps is a minor seventh. If we keep counting, 11 half steps would be a major seventh. And then finally, the perfect octave would be 12 half steps. But A natural is a minor seventh or 10 half steps. So now, if we just leave A natural as is, we would be making a minor seventh like we talked about. But this is diminished, so this is 1 half step less, or we're gonna have to lower that note by a half step to make it diminished. So if we go to A natural and we lower A natural by a half step, we're gonna end up with A flat. So we're gonna have to make that A flat. Now, watch out, because you may want to think that A flat is the same pitch as G sharp, right? But the problem if you make this G sharp is that you would no longer have a generic seventh interval. You'd have a generic sixth, because that would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces above. You see that. That's very important. So you do not want to make a generic sixth, even though in reality this interval has exactly the same sound, it's the same pitches as the diminished seventh. This would be a major sixth, okay? But we don't want to make a major sixth, we want to make a diminished seventh. So we're gonna have to go up to A and make that flat, okay? So let's go ahead and submit. So that's our diminished seventh. It sounds exactly the same as a major sixth, but when you write it on the staff, we have to be more specific than that. All right, so let's try one more example, and then I'll let you guys try as many as you want at home. All right, so we have an augmented interval now. This is a uppercase A that gives us our quality, which is augmented, and our generic interval is a second, so augmented second. And we have an E. Let's not think about the key signature for now. The first step is just the generic interval, which is just about the spaces and lines on the staff. So a second is very easy. We just need to go up one, and that's our generic second. Now let's figure out how many half steps we might need for this. So if you remember the relationship, an augmented interval is a half step higher than either a perfect interval or a major interval. So it's a half step bigger or half step more. So seconds can only be minor or major. They cannot be perfect. So if we have an augmented second, that means that we have to go from a major second and make that half step bigger to make an augmented second. Now, if you remember what that looks like, a major second would be 2 half steps. 2 half steps. So to make the augmented second, we're going to have to add a half step to that. Now, let's figure it out with the actual notes on the staff. So we have E, but we have flat in the key signature. So it's going to be E flat, which is, this is E natural. E flat is 1 half step lower. So from E flat, we need to make 3 half steps, because a major second is 2 half steps and an augmented second is 3 half steps. Okay, so let's count to 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so this is our augmented second. And let's take a look at what we have on the staff. On the staff, we have written F. But this key right here, this would be F natural. But we need to go up a half step to go from this key to this key, which is what we need. So we need to make that F sharp. And you see how I did that. So this is E flat, 1, 2, 3 half steps. So I had to go from F natural to F sharp to make it work. Okay? So now, the last thing I'm going to mention is this F sharp could also be spelled as G flat, but be careful. Even though that interval sounds the same, it's the same sound, this would actually be a minor third, which is also 3 half steps, but we'd have to count another generic step. So we'd have to go 1, 2, and 3, because of the position of the staff, this would be a third and not a second. Okay, so just be mindful of that. That's why generic intervals are important, because we have to take the distance on the staff into consideration as well. So we need to bring that down and make that sharp. All right, so let's submit. All right, so you guys can see making specific intervals is a little bit more confusing than generic intervals, but it's not that complicated if you follow this 3-step rule. First, make your generic interval on the staff. Second, figure out the number of half steps that you need. And third, add accidentals if you need to make the number of half steps work.